some have asked why MPA did not immediately deploy the containment booms on board its petrol vessel while waiting for TNT's vessel to arrive. So the booms on board the MPA vessel, this is the petrol vessel, are lightweight oil containment booms, which are suitable for dealing quickly with small-scale and localized oil spills, such as oil leakages during bunkering operations. These lightweight booms were assessed to be unsuitable for dealing with the oil spill incident on 14 June, which was a more serious spill involving the sudden discharge of an estimated 400 tons of oil into the sea. For such spills, the petrol vessel will focus on spraying dispersants and deploy contractors to lay heavy-duty oil containment booms around the damaged vessel as a preventive measure in case there's further spillage of oil from the vessel. So this is the established procedure, which is in line with international practices for dealing with oil spills. And the MPA response team on the petrol vessel followed the procedure correctly.
And given the extremely heavy traffic in our surrounding waters and the significant environmental consequences of oil spillage accidents, I'm wondering if it makes sense, economic sense, to have an in-house oil spillage containment capacity rather than to contract this out to outfits such as TNT. After all, my understanding is that the best practice response time is closer to something like 2 to 4 hours rather than the 6 or so that we engaged in.
It is not the case that the capabilities and the assets have all been outsourced. MPA do have quite a bit of in-house capabilities too. The petrol vessel, the first to arrive on the scene, that was an MPA petrol vessel. MPA also has its own vessels that it has deployed. But given the nature of oil spills, and that it could happen not just in Singapore waters, but also could happen in the waters in our region, we do want to do two things. First is to have good collaborations with our neighbors so that in case there is an incident, there's coordinated response, there's collaboration, we deal with it because in a coordinated manner, because the oil could flow from our waters to their shores or from their waters to our shores. So this is part one of how we deal with the oil spills. Part two is we will also want to work with the industry because some of these contractors are specialized experts. Some of them specialize in laying of booms. Some of them specialize in skimming the oil. Some of them specialize in some other areas. So it is important for us to not see this as a binary kind of situation, that everything has to be in-house or everything has to be outsourced. I think we need both. We do need to have some in-house capabilities, and we do have.
It's been reported that TNT Salvage Asia was mobilized on the same day of the collision at about 2:55 p.m. And it took them just over 14 hours before they were mobilized and finished laying the 200-meter booms around the Marine Honor. The MPA reported on 16 June, at least, that Oil Spill Response Limited, OSRL, the largest international industry-funded cooperative providing oil spill response services, was supporting the cleanup efforts. Given OSRL's and resources and expertise at hand, may I ask the Minister for Transport, why was OSRL not mobilized concurrently with TNT Salvage Asia immediately after the collision to deploy the containment booms around the Marine Honor, especially with a view to reduce the deployment time and to reduce the subsequent spread of the oil spill? My second question, bearing in mind the time required for TNT Salvage Asia to mobilize for the deployment of booms, and in particular, around the Marine Honor, would MPA consider reviewing the storage, loading, and mobilization processes of all equipment, including required containment booms, to ensure that mobilization time can be reduced? In particular, will the government consider requiring terminals at places, shipping terminals at locations like Pasir Panjang, Pulau Bukom, Pulau Sebarok, and Jurong Island to have containment booms within easy reach of rescue vessels for quick deployment?
If I understood Mr. Tan's questions correctly, there's a certain underlying assumption, which is that TNT salvage had been slow and had not been doing its work properly, if I understood him correctly. I think that's not the case. TNT salvage was not the only contractor engaged by MPA. MPA has, as I mentioned earlier, in response to Associate Professor Jamus Lim, in-house capabilities as well as a group of contractors that they work with in the industry. And these are experts with many years of experience dealing with oil spills. For TNT, Captain Anuj, which is the boss of the company, he was informed by his staff, who were notified by MPA in the afternoon of 14th June. He was informed at 2:55. And I think he explained this in a media interview that upon being informed about this oil spill, he then had to mobilize to load up the heavy equipment. So Mr. Tan is a maritime lawyer. I'm sure he understands these are not lightweight, simple equipment. These are heavy equipment that will require time to load up onto the vessel. And that's what TNT did in the first instance. So that process to load up the equipment took some time. Then they had to sail from not Pasir Panjang, they sailed from Marina South Wharf, because that is the wharf that is designed to load vessels like the TNT salvage vessel to be able to deal with incidents like oil spills. And there is a reason why we chose Marina South Wharves, because if you think about the entire anchorage in the southern part of Singapore, you have from Tuas to Pasir Panjang and all the way to the eastern anchorages. So if you were to put your loading point in the western part or in the eastern part, it may not be as centralized as Marina South Wharves. So they arrived, incident site, at 9:41 p.m. And I think as Captain Anuj explained during his media interview, it was at night. The weather was bad. So he and his crew did their best to deploy the heavy containment boom as quickly as they can, but it took them till the next morning before they could fully deploy. So I think there's also an important point of clarification that I need to raise in response to Mr. Tan's question, because there's this assumption that the arrival of TNT and laying out the booms could contain and fence in the oil that has been spilled around the vessel. So I think that is not the correct understanding. The oil that has been spilled, especially when it is in a large amount, estimated 400 tons, sudden discharge into the sea, it will not stay there. There will be tidal currents, there will be waves, and these will carry the oil and it will float elsewhere. So the purpose of deploying TNT salvage is not to try and fence in the oil. It is to try and have a preventive measure around the damaged vessel, because let's not forget, there's still a lot of oil inside the damaged vessel that has not been released and spilled into the sea. So we wanted to make sure that in case there's further spillage, there is a preventive measure around the damaged vessel.
Can I confirm that the Minister said just now in response to my SQ that the purpose of the containment boom around the damaged vessel is not meant to try to catch the oil that has already been spilled into the sea, and that it's not the correct response to try and use the containment booms to fence in the oil around the damaged vessel? If so, what is the purpose of deploying containment booms? The Minister said that how we respond to oil spills can make a difference to our reputation around the world. Does the Minister not agree that the earlier the booms are deployed, the better? Because even if the booms cannot completely fence in the oil, they can prevent a large amount of the oil from spreading faster. And this would reduce the amount of oil, reduce the amount and cost of the cleanup needed. So are we looking to increasing our capacity for faster boom deployment in future oil spills?
Having this exchange, it's not my view versus Mr. Giam's view. What I'm sharing with Mr. Giam is the international practice and the industry's response to oil spills. So these are methods and processes that have been developed over the years by experts, and this is how it is done internationally, not just in Singapore, but also in other parts of the world. So I think this is not an opinion that we are debating over. This is what I'm sharing is actually what is the international practice. But allow me to come back to the concern that Mr. Giam raised, which is the sooner you deploy, the better. No, there's no disagreement that faster is better. However, knowing that boom deployment requires time, even if you are able to do it very quickly because the weather was good, it was daytime, you're able to do it more quickly, it is still going to have a time lag. And I hope Mr. Giam understands that. From the point of the lesion and the oil spilling in a large amount into the sea, by the time the booms are fully deployed, even under the best circumstances, there will be a gap. And during this time, the oil would have floated away. So that is why the international industry practice is not to try and fence in the oil, because it's not practical. The oil would have floated away, and it's to deal with what is remaining in the vessel to prevent further spillage in case it comes out, because there's no guarantee that the oil will stay inside the damaged vessel. It could spill again. And if in that scenario, when your boom is up, then yes, you will be able to contain that amount of oil, the subsequent spillage, better. But for the oil that has floated away, the international practice is to, as quickly as possible, try and locate where the oil is, and then to be able to scoop it out, collect it. So that was what was done. But as I explained earlier, it took some time before MPA and the contractors were able to confirm the location of the large oil patches. They were only able to do so the next morning, 15 June morning, due to bad weather on the first day, the initial part, and then subsequently because of nightfall. Various reasons made it more challenging. But when they discovered where the oil was, they very quickly deployed the skimmers, the oil skimmers, to deal with it. So there's no disagreement with Mr. Giam that speed is important and faster is better. But I also hope Mr. Giam understands that even under the best circumstances, some tasks are just not possible, not practical. And in this case, it is not possible to try and fence in the oil around the damaged vessel because it has already been spilled and it will be carried by the currents and the waves away from the location site.